What is up, you guys? Josh here, back at it again with a brand new movie review. This is going to be for Thor Ragnarok, so if you've seen an image of Thor Ragnarok behind me, that is the movie that we're going to be talking about. This movie is all sorts of cool and is one of the newer takes on sort of the Thor mythology. This is more of a comedic version of Thor, which the first two movies were sort of a darker version, which not too many of the Marvel MCU fans really liked, but I actually really liked the first Thor movie, even though I understand it's more or less a C-grade film, but maybe I'll review that in a later edition. So this movie stars Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Anthony Hopkins as Odin, which I think Anthony Hopkins does a really good job playing Odin in this movie. You got Tom Hiddleston back as a Loki, or the God of Mischief, which eventually Thor will say later on in the film, which we'll definitely talk about that at a later date. You've got Emma Thompson as the Valkyrie, which she is really badass in this role, and this is the first time that I really saw Emma Thompson being sort of a kick-ass character within a film. You've also got the inclusion of Jeff Goldblum, which his character is more like a tyrannical dictator, but we will also talk about that within this review. And you've also got Korg, who is played by Taika Waititi, and Taika Waititi actually is the guy who directed this movie. This movie, like I said before, is a comedic take on Thor, so if you like the first two movies where it's a little bit darker, sort of like the DCEU, you're going to be a little bit disappointed by the direction that they take with the characters in this movie. But I actually really like that the first moment we see Thor sort of battling this fire demon that kind of looks like Satan a little bit. He's kind of mouthing off to sort of this demon and making quips and jokes and stuff, even though he's pretty much held prisoner. And this is a really great way to kind of set the tone for a different sort of Thor movie, and that's definitely what Taika Waititi is known for, is taking really good concepts and making different, unique takes on them. Thor breaks free. He eventually goes to Asgard, where Loki has pretty much taken the form of Anthony Hopkins' character Odin. Odin is the ruler of Asgard, and he's pretty much watching sort of a reenactment of the events of Thor, where sort of Thor and Loki are having sort of their brotherly squabbles, especially on sort of the Rainbow Bridge, which eventually is broken, and you see the sever of the ties between the Rainbow Bridge and Midgard, which is Earth. And throughout the movie, you kind of see sort of this kind of squabbling take place, and you sort of see this brother on brother sort of action happen. You know, Thor eventually confronts Loki, as Anthony Hopkins' character eventually getting him to transform everybody in sort of the area, including Matt Damon, who shows up as Loki, which is pretty badass to see sort of Matt Damon in these movies. I wish they would have made him an actual sort of superhero character. Maybe they kind of weave that storyline in where he's actually one of the Avengers or something in a future Marvel movie, but Matt Damon does a pretty good job playing that of Loki. You've also got someone that's reenacting Thor in this movie, and he also does a really great job as well. But you see that Hela kind of invades Asgard and is trying to take the rightful throne of Asgard, being that she was pretty much cast out by Odin himself. She is the sister of Thor as well as Loki, and in this movie you get that awesome funny line where Thor is trying to convince Mark Ruffalo's character, who's also in this movie, to kind of go with him back to Asgard and to fight against Hela, and he's like, yeah, I don't want to fight your sister, that's kind of a brother-sister sort of problem, not my problem, and everything, which I thought was pretty funny. Like, this movie has a lot of really funny lines in this film, like the line where he's like, let's do get help, which is basically Thor and Loki. He's pretty much like, my brother's injured and everything, I need help. And that's where you see sort of Thor kind of throw Loki into a group of military soldiers on sort of the tyrannical leader's sort of trash planet, and see sort of that sort of bonding. You get that really cool moment where Thor tells Loki that, you know, he could be so much more than just the God of Mischief, but that he just kind of wants to stay the same as he is and wants to make the same mistakes. You know, this leads to Thor eventually going to the trash planet, which the trash planet is similar to that of the trash planet in Blade Runner, as well as the trash planet that you see in the movie Soldier with Kurt Russell, which I think is a really, really great movie. So if you haven't seen Soldier yet, you should definitely check it out. There's a lot of really cool one-liners in that movie as well, and it takes place within the Blade Runner universe, which is also pretty sick. You get Jeff Goldblum's sort of emergence as this tyrannical dictator who only cares about, you know, himself. He's a rather narcissistic personality. He has sort of statues and temples sort of dedicated to him, and he makes sort of the male combatants fight in sort of this gladiatorial arena, especially the prisoners, which is where you see sort of the battle between Hulk and Thor that you see in the trailers. And he's like, oh, this is my friend from work, where you see sort of the Hulk kind of smashing Thor like multiple different times, especially one time where Hulk kind of beats the living shit out of Thor, kind of like what he did with Loki in the Avengers movies. And then that's where you get that really cool scene where you see Loki kind of get up like a jilted lover, and he's like, yeah, that's what it feels like. Like, there's really cool moments and really cool one-liners like that within this movie. There's also sort of Thor during that same sequence, he's trying to console the Hulk and trying to get him back to Bruce Banner, and he's like, it's okay, big guy, the sun's starting to get real low right now. Kind of the same line that Black Widow used in Avengers Age of Ultron, which not too many people like that movie. I don't really like that movie that much at all. Like, I kind of watch it every once in a while, but lately I haven't really watched it. So, you know, it's one of those Avengers movies that you can kind of skip, and you don't really have to kind of worry about that, even though they kind of introduced Scarlet Witch in that film, but that is neither here nor there. The topic for a different review completely. You see sort of that sort of line come back, and then Hulk just tosses him into the side of the wall of the gladiatorial arena. Hulk and Thor kind of have this brother on brother sort of fight where Thor kind of calls him the stupid Avenger and says that Earth hates him, even though that's definitely not true, and that Earth definitely does like him. And he's rather pissed off because of the fact that his father, Odin, has died, and both Thor and Loki kind of watched Anthony Hopkins' character die right after he's kind of explains that the cliff faces of Scotland could be sort of Asgard, and that Asgard's not a place, it's a people, which I think is a really cool line. It's pretty much similar to that of Star Wars, where sort of Anthony Hopkins tells Thor later on in the film that, you know, wise king doesn't go out looking for a fight. He's always prepared for it, which is similar to the Jedi way of using their lightsabers, where lightsabers are never supposed to be used as sort of a weapon for attack, always defense and stuff like that, which the Star Wars universe heavily influenced Marvel because Kevin Feige was a big Star Wars fan, and he brought a lot of the similar elements from Star Wars into Thor Ragnarok and all the other MCU movies and stuff like that, so that's why you get similar moments within his films. Definitely a hero's journey moment because you get this hero that kind of has to answer the call even though he doesn't really want to at the beginning of the film, and then later on his character has to grow through trial and tribulations, and that's definitely the case for Thor. You know, Thor starts off as this hero that doesn't really want to do this anymore. He wants to become the rightful ruler of Asgard, but everything is pretty much pushing him back and making him sort of rethink that, and you get this really cool moment in sort of this Quinjet where Thor and Hulk eventually escape sort of the confines of their captivity in this sort of luxury prison cell that they've been kept in, and with the help of Emma Thompson's character, and you sort of see Hulk kind of smashing through the Quinjet, and then Thor plays sort of the message from Black Widow in Avengers, sort of calming him down a little bit and turning him back into Mark Ruffalo. They have this really funny joke where Thor kind of gives Mark Ruffalo's character Tony Stark's clothes, and he's like, yeah, no, this is Tony's clothes, and he's like, yeah, I know, and Mark Ruffalo's like, you know, Tony's clothes are rather tight and stuff, making fun of Tony Stark for wearing sort of like skinny jeans and stuff like that, which I thought was rather funny. Like, this whole entire movie is just laugh out loud humor. Like, even in the theater when I was watching it with a group of people, I was laughing my ass off, and this was really a fresh take on sort of the Thor mythos, especially after sort of the seriousness that was the first two movies, and the fact that I didn't really like Thor: The Dark World that much. You see sort of the progression of Thor within this film where he has to be sort of the bigger brother to Loki, and eventually in this film they make their escape back to a Quinjet, and they're eventually going to try and escape onto Jeff Goldblum's sort of ship. They play that sort of game where I said get help, where Thor pretty much throws Loki onto a group of enemy soldiers as they're trying to take down Thor and bring him back to Jeff Goldblum. They steal Jeff Goldblum's ship, and there's this big giant sort of epic sort of sweeping sort of city battle, and they kind of explain in a joke that this ship is pretty much used for Jeff Goldblum orgies and that he's a really big fan of them, and Thor tells Mark Ruffalo's character not to touch anything, which I thought was pretty funny because, you know, it's kind of disgusting to think what would have probably happened on board that ship, and Mark Ruffalo eventually takes command of the ship after Thor pretty much leaps out of it in order to battle sort of the other ships that are chasing after them. You get that really funny scene when Mark Ruffalo is kind of like, we're approaching the devil's anus, which they eventually go back to Asgard, and they realize that Asgard has become under siege by Hela. Hela's taken control over the Asgardian army. She has killed, or so she thinks she has killed, Idris Elba's character, who's the watcher of Asgard and controls the Rainbow Bridge. You know, Thor, Loki, and the Incredible Hulk have to make their way and try and stop Hela. There's a big battle sequence between Hela and Thor. Eventually Thor pretty much loses an eye, which, spoiler alert, that happens. I'm sorry I didn't kind of tell you guys that sooner, but you guys probably should have seen that coming if you were a big fan of the MCU, especially seeing as though Odin has sort of a missing eye as well, and sort of that cool little piece that he wears, kind of like a sunglass. I think it's really cool that they kind of implement sort of that tech, that magical and sort of realistic scientific kind of technology into this universe. Like, the science fiction stuff and the fantasy definitely do mix in this film, and I'm a huge big fan of science fiction and mythology, so to kind of get a film that kind of mixes those together in sort of a really cool movie like Thor Ragnarok, you eventually find out that Thor Ragnarok, or the whole Ragnarok myth, is that it was about destroying Asgard, not saving it. Thor kind of realizes that he has to unleash sort of this gigantic monster that he originally fought within the first part of this film in order to kind of destroy Asgard and sort of make a new home elsewhere on Earth. That eventually happens, and you get sort of the end battle sequence where Hela has this big giant dire wolf almost like creature, and Hulk is like, you know, I got this, to Emma Thompson, which pretty much always trying to impress Emma Thompson's Valkyrie within this film. And you've also got sort of that love triangle between Chris Hemsworth's Thor and Valkyrie, where he's honestly sort of like an obsessed fanboy, where he wanted to be sort of a Valkyrie as a kid, but later learned, like he says in the film, that it's pretty much a female only type of organization and that he couldn't really be a part of it anyway, and he's almost obsessed like a fanboy over her. I thought that was pretty cool that they kind of have this sort of love triangle going, and Mark Ruffalo's character is like, you know, I got this, and he leaps off of the jet that they're kind of in and crashes onto the Rainbow Bridge as this dire wolf he's trying to fight just kind of ignores him and moves on towards the people down below that Idris Elba is trying to get to safety. Even Idris Elba's character has a lot of really cool moments with this film, and you also get sort of Karl Urban, who plays this character that is really obsessed with weaponry and stuff. At the beginning of the film, he's trying to impress these women, and he's like, I got these two weapons off of Midgard, they called Destroy, and he says that he got them from a place called Texas, which I think was a pretty funny moment within this film. Like I said before, there's a lot of really cool one-liners, and the mark of a great movie to me is one that kind of incorporates sort of all these one-liners, and it's something that you're thinking about even after you kind of leave the theater, and this is definitely one of those films. With the special effects in the story, I really did enjoy myself in the theater. I thought the mix between CGI and real-life elements definitely did a number, especially with the fact that it makes it look realistic, like it's actually you're there in the scene with these actors. I think fans of both the MCU and sort of the Marvel universe in general, especially the character of Thor, will definitely appreciate this take on Chris Hemsworth's Thor. Anthony Hopkins gives a stellar performance as the Asgardian King Odin, and all the other actors have really cool moments within this movie. You know, none of these actors or the characters that they portray feel like they don't belong in this movie. That's what I really like, is if they could utilize these actors in a really unique and interesting way that kind of makes them feel a little bit different, but sort of the same as they used to be. Thor Ragnarok definitely does that, and Taika Waititi as a director is really great at sort of combining the comedic timing with sort of the seriousness. So I would have to give Thor Ragnarok an A+. I think this is definitely a movie that fans of filmmaking should definitely see, especially since the writing is really, really good in this movie. The story, well crafted, universe that they put him in, sort of mixing Asgard with that trash planet. It's really cool, and it's kind of cool to see a movie kind of globe-trot in different sort of directions that you never would have thought be possible. Also, the inclusion of the immigrant song throughout sort of these battle sequences with Thor is really cool. I wish they would have used it in sort of the Avengers films, and you're kind of expecting that, and they never really did that, which kind of cheapened the moment, because whenever Thor does something cool within this movie, you get that immigrant song, and it kind of preps you for what's to come, and they really utilize sort of the sound design and the music and stuff really well. As always, guys, rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.